All right, we are live, huh? Beautiful. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending what I think is the record-setting edition of the Outdoor Equity Fund grant webinar. I think according to Michelle, we have 177-ish people signed up. So, way to set a record for this. That means that the word is getting out about Outdoor Equity Fund. My name is Evan Pilling. I'm the grants coordinator for ORD. Also on the call is Michelle Simon, who is our marketing guru. Michelle will be handling the back end stuff, keeping the wheels on the bus, and I will be running through the slideshow or the slide deck. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, you'll probably notice that you're all muted. We're going to keep everyone muted just to avoid any background noise. Hopefully everyone knows how to use the chat feature. Michelle will be dropping additional information in the chat. Also, that's where we would love to see your questions. We're gonna try to take 15-ish minutes at the end of the presentation to go through any questions. What I always ask is to try to keep, if you do ask questions in this format, to try to keep them as general as possible, things that might be relevant to other grantees, with the understanding that if you have specific questions, I'm available either by email or by through one-on-one meetings and teams to get more into the specifics of your application. So we'll talk more
Hey,
about that later.
real quick, Evan, it looks like some folks are having some issue and not seeing any video. They're getting audio. I'm not sure how to fix that problem.
Somebody said they reloaded the call and could see it.
Okay, I would say anyone who is not getting video, jump out of the call and then try jumping back in. It looks like
Congratulations, we're going
that's
to crash teams.
so folks, please go ahead and jump out if you don't see any video and then log back in.
Yeah. Luckily, you haven't missed anything important yet.
And we'll just wait another few minutes for this to smooth over. I'm going to start letting people back in.
So for folks who are just jumping in, looks like some folks are having video issues, and the consensus seems to be if you leave the meeting and join back in, that seems to work. So we're just going to pause for a couple minutes and see if we can get those video issues addressed. All right.
Looks like that's working for folks. Somebody asked
Yep.
if you could turn up your audio. Audio is fine on my end. It might be on your end if you're not hearing anything. Evan's coming through loud and clear for me.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't have any control over the audio input, so you just got to turn the volume up on your end. Turn it up to 11. Okay, seems like, and again, just one more time for folks who had joined late and maybe having video issues, what you have to do is leave the meeting and join back in, and that seems to work well for everyone. So we're just going to pause for another minute, let everyone get back in. Yes, and happy almost solstice, everyone. I saw somebody comment on that. That's exciting. Excited for the days to start getting longer, and we can actually go out and do outside stuff more than the 2 days a week that most of us aren't still at the office when things are getting dark. All right. I think I'm going to get going again. Just as a quick reminder, because we were having some issues there, this webinar is being recorded. Everyone will be sent a recording of it afterwards. If you can use the chat feature, open that up because Michelle will be dropping additional information and resources in there. Also, that's where we ask that you place any questions that you have. We're going to reserve some time at the end of the webinar to go through everyone's questions. We're going to make it a point to answer questions that are general enough that they would pertain to a wider variety of folks. And if you have specific questions, I'm available by email and via one-on-one chat, and we'll provide more information for that later. Real quick introduction to the ORD team. We're a small but mighty team of four. Karina Armijo is our director. Carl Colonius is our program manager. He serves as the outdoor recreation planner supporting project development statewide and also manages the Trails Plus grant program. And I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. Michelle Simon, who, as I mentioned, is on the call, is our marketing coordinator. She manages all of our social media assets, our newsletter, pretty much anything public facing that looks good, you can thank Michelle for. She does an excellent job with the storytelling and information sharing for ORD. And again, my name is Evan Pilling. I'm the grants coordinator. I manage the Outdoor Equity Fund grant program and support Trails Plus and a variety of other initiatives. New Mexico Outdoor Recreation Division, we were created in 2019, the same year as the Outdoor Equity Fund. So we've been charging it for 6 years, focused on our mission of increasing equitable access to the outdoors for all New Mexicans. We have 5 core values. Those are sustainable economic development, equity and access, conservation and stewardship, education, and health and well-being. So, we provide funding, we try to provide education, and just make sure that New Mexicans have access to the beautiful lands and outdoors around us. Outdoor Equity Fund is one of our 2 primary grant programs. Again, the other one is Trails Plus. Since our first round of funding awarded in 2020, we have awarded a total of $8.2 million to 345 grants, serving a total of more than 106,000 New Mexico youth. So that's more than 100,000 New Mexico youth have had greater opportunities to get outside thanks to OEF and the generous support from our legislature. For this call is for round 2 of fiscal year 2026. The numbers have fluctuated a bit as we have had some running changes, but what we have confirmed is that we will have a total of $1.9 million available. The round 2 application period opens January 1st. Important to note that previously application periods had been open for 2 months. Moving forward, application periods will be open for 1 month. That's so that we can expedite the disbursement process and get funds on the ground and get kiddos outside as quickly as possible. So round 2 application period will run January 1st to January 31st. Everything is done through the submittable grant portal. I'm guessing many, if not most of you are familiar with that. If not, you will get familiar with it. It's a pretty intuitive and pretty easy to use grant portal. A quick rundown of where our funding is at so far. So we've had a total of slightly more than $4 million available for OEF in this fiscal year, and that's thanks to a one-time, one-year special appropriation of $3 million, in addition to our annual contributions of $382,600 from the Outdoor Equity Fund and $565,000 from the Land of Enchantment Legacy Fund. For round 1, which we're finally getting the funding out the door for now. Thank you for your patience, those of you who are waiting for that. We had 140 applicants. Of those, 102 were reviewed, and of those 102, we were able to fund 62 of them at a total of $2.2 million. What that illustrates is, number 1, again, the word is getting out. Folks are learning about Outdoor Equity Fund and how valuable those funds are. And number 2, it is an increasingly competitive grant process. of the folks who applied and were not awarded, I did a good number of feedback calls to help folks figure out how to strengthen their grants. And again, I've just been really reiterating the fact that this is a more and more competitive grant program, and as such, we really need the strongest possible proposals for funding. Okay. So here's what the ORD website looks like. I'm going to assume that everybody's on this call has been to the ORD website because that's how you would have signed up for this webinar. If you go to the Outdoor Equity Fund page, this button here is where you will go to take you to Submittable to start the application process. What you will notice is you can't get to that application yet because it's not open. So that application will be going live at 12 midnight, or yeah, 12:01 a.m. on New Year's Day. And so that's when you'll be able to access that. Also on the website is the link to our very valuable and handy dandy grant guide. That's where you're going to get all of the information you need to submit the strongest possible application. Also, if you want to see how various grant funds have been spent, we have a grant recipients map that shows you locations, funding amount, gives you some project overviews. As you can see, we have a pretty strong distribution of grants across most of the counties in New Mexico. But I would encourage you to take a look at seeing all the amazing projects that are being implemented both with Outdoor Equity Fund and Trails Plus across the state. The grant guide. I'm going to say it. I said it, and I'm going to keep saying it. Please, please, please review the grant guide in its entirety. Be thorough in looking at it. It gives you it before you reach out with any questions specific to your grant application. My question is always going to be, did you read the grant guide? Because a lot of the questions that folks have will be answered there. Some of the pertinent information in that grant guide is who is eligible. Well, I'm glad you guys asked. Eligible applicants are tribes, pueblos, and nations, municipalities, municipal and county governments, registered 501c3 nonprofits or nonprofit organizations with fiscal sponsors, K through 12 schools, as long as they are public or nonprofit, and colleges and universities. Who is not eligible to apply are state and federal agencies and businesses and for-profit entities, and that does include for-profit educational institutions. As we said, round 2 opens January 1st, closes, we got to update that. It closes January 31st. The award range is $5,000 to $40,000, and we're going to get into some new limitations or stipulations on request amounts later. There is a 2-to-1 required match for Outdoor Equity Fund, and what that means is that for every $2 of funding requested, applicants must demonstrate $1 in match. Match can be cash match, it can be in-kind match, including staff time, volunteer time, community donations, but we really want to see that support from the community, from your organization and from the community for that project. We do have match waivers available. Automatic match waivers are available for tribal communities, rural communities, and rural is defined as any part of the state other than Los Alamos County, Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, Farmington, Las Cruces, Roswell, Santa Fe, and a 10-mile radius around those city limits. Even if you do qualify for a match waiver, we strongly encourage you to demonstrate providing some match that shows, again, community support and organizational capacity. And so even if you qualify for a match, anything you can demonstrate in terms of volunteer hours, staff time, donations, anything in direct support of the project will help strengthen your application. We are willing to discuss match waivers for folks who don't qualify for those automatic match waivers. You would reach out to me directly to discuss that. What I often find when folks ask about match waivers is when we dig into it, they find that they can actually come up with a pretty substantial match. But part of our goal is to reduce barriers to successful outdoor rec programming for youth. And so if that match requirement is a significant barrier, please reach out and we'll talk about it and we'll see what we can do to help. Contract and reporting requirements. The reporting requirements are pretty simple. Number one, the grant agreement duration is 18 months from the time that your grant agreement is signed and executed by ORD. So that's not 18 months from when you are notified about your grant award. It is 18 months from when the EDD secretary has signed off and fully executed your grant agreement. We'll get a little more into more specific timetables down the road. And then again, just you'll hear it further, but we have a progress report and a final report requirement. Everything is done through Submittable, and then we ask/require that you tag us in social media posts and you give appropriate recognition to ORD for your grant funding. Moving on into what is eligible and ineligible for grant funding. Eligible expenses include services, materials, and that materials can include program equipment, program supplies, transportation and travel. That can include hiring a bus company or gas and mileage for organization vehicles. We've even had grantees request funding for gas cards if you're in a rural area and families getting to the program site is a big barrier. We recognize that transportation is often a barrier to participation, so we allow for funding for that. Administrative, any applicant can include up to 10% of their grant request for administrative fees, and that's often organizational overhead, rent, utilities, stuff like that. Important to note that if you request $40,000, it doesn't mean that you request $4,000 on top of that $40,000. It means that if you request $40,000, 4,000 of that $40,000 can be reserved for admin. Billed labor, that can include staff time, it can include internships, it can include maybe you're using a guide service, maybe you're using outside speakers, maybe you have honoraria for elders who are coming to speak to the youth. So any of those billed labor. What we do stress is that any billed labor has to directly tie into and support the programming. What we're not interested in doing is funding general operating costs for the organization. And so if you're asking for money for staff time or outside experts, it all has to directly support that core mission of getting youth outside. And then some of the miscellaneous expenses that are allowable, insurance, especially if you're a startup organization, insurance can be a big barrier. OEF funds can be used for that. Food, we like kiddos to be well fed so that they can productively participate in programming, so that's allowable. And again, if you have specific questions about program or about allowable expenses, let me know. What is not eligible for OEF funding? Number one, programs without significant exposure to the outdoors or nature-based environments. What I tell folks is that OEF funded programs need to have a meaningful and substantial connection to the outside world. There can definitely be an indoor component to it as long as it directly contributes to that outdoor experience. But we will not fund 100% classroom-based or indoor experiences. OEF funds cannot be used to fund traditional organized youth sports. Sometimes we call those stick and ball sports, or traditional parks and recreation activities. So soccer, football, baseball, pickleball, the swim team, anything like that are not going to be eligible for outdoor equity funding. Infrastructure development. That's what Trails Plus is for. If you want to build a trail or a trailhead or a bike park or any in the ground infrastructure, OEF funds are not for that. The way I describe it is, if you want to build a skate park, Trails Plus is going to be your grant program. If you want to get funding to buy skateboards and hire instructors to come in and do youth programming around that skate park, that's what Outdoor Equity Fund is for. Out-of-state travel is not an allowable expense, so funds can't be used to take kiddos out of state. We've had a number of folks wanting to purchase vehicles. Unfortunately, that's not an allowable expense through Outdoor Equity Fund. We do not fund one-time events, even if it's outdoor recreation focused. If you're having a fair or a celebration or something like that. So any outdoor equity fund money needs to go towards programming, not a one-time event. And then photo and video documentation is not an allowable expense unless it's bundled in with that 10% admin fee. As always, Michelle, please jump in if I'm forgetting anything. Um, uh, so some examples of that might be a summer camp program that is only providing organized sports opportunities. That would not be allowable. We do get a number of OEF applications from summer camps. And what I stress is that, or what I should say is, we get a number of funding requests from programs that include outdoor recreation components, but also include a good number of non-outdoor rec components. What I strongly suggest is that your funding request only focus on funding for the outdoor rec components. And so if you're a summer camp and you do rock climbing and paddling, but also arts and crafts and talent shows and, you know, baseball and stuff like that, your application should really focus on just what funding is needed for the outdoor rec components there. And again, equipment only projects. If you wanted to build a pump track or something like that, that's not going to be included in OEF. So any infrastructure projects. The frequently asked questions, the FAQ part is really important. We have updated that since last round. And so even if you applied for round one and you were not funded, please make sure that you review that. Some important additions that we have. Number one, we've provided clarification on when and how current and past grantees can reapply. If you are a past OEF recipient or even a current one, you may be eligible for reapplication. The policy at hand is that no organization can receive funding more than once in any 12-month period, whether that's calendar year or fiscal year. And current and past grantees can reapply if they have submitted a progress report and have spent minimum 50% of their grant funds. So, what we can't do is have folks continue to reapply every 6 months. We want to be able to provide ongoing funding for qualified programs while also supporting new applicants as well. Another addition is you will notice when we get to the application that we ask what your organization's annual operating budget is. New as of 2026 is that the funding request cannot exceed more than 50% of your annual operating budget. So if you're a small volunteer nonprofit and perhaps your annual operating budget is $20,000, your funding request would be limited to $10,000. If you have a $40,000 annual operating budget, your funding request will be limited to 20. You have to have an 80,000 or more annual operating budget to request the full amount. Just like the match, waivers are possible there, especially if you're a startup or a newer nonprofit who is just getting going. I'm more than happy to have those conversations, and you can reach out directly if you want to discuss a waiver of that cap. Another important addition to be aware of is that effective round 2 of 2020 or fiscal year 26, if you are using contracted services, for example, outside programmers, maybe you're hiring a raft or a guiding company or an outfitter, any outside contractor or service provider who is costing $5,000 or more, you will be required to submit a written bid or cost estimate with your grant application. So just keep that in mind if you're hiring outside contractors, school bus company, raft guide, horse packing, whatever it is, any outside contractor or service provider, $5,000 or more, you will be required to submit a written bid or cost estimate with your application, and there's a space in there. I talked a little bit about the funding timeline, and that's something we get a lot of questions about. I will be the first to acknowledge that we move very slow, both in our review and funds disbursement process. We do our level best to get funds out the door as quickly as possible, but unfortunately it is a long process. But just so that folks understand what the timeline looks like, When you submit your application, you submit your W-9. At the end of that application period, we do an internal eligibility review. And then we have a review committee comprised of ORD staff, Economic Development Department staff, past grantees and stakeholders. We do conflict checks to make sure that there are no real or potential conflicts of interest. For round one, every grant application got 2 solid reviews on it, and then we were able to get a third review on the middle of the pack, who we just decided more attention was needed. And then that's how we used a scoring rubric, and that's how funding decisions were made. Once folks are notified that they are awarded, we review their W-9. If the W-9 is correct, we submit that to our finance. Sometimes there's up to a 6 to 8 week delay between when we submit that W-9 and we get confirmation and we get a vendor number. So that's one of the big slowdowns. That's where reading the instructions thoroughly on the grant application and submitting that W-9 correctly the first time speeds things up. Once we get that vendor ID back, we use that to create a purchase request and a grant agreement. The grant agreement is signed by the grantee. It's then elevated up the food chain, and it is signed by the Economic Development Department Secretary. That purchase request is sent to, again, finance to generate a PO. Purchase order. The purchase order is sent back to the grantee with the grant agreement. The grantee generates an invoice. They send it back to us. We send it to finance, and that's how the check or the electronic transfer is created. So that's probably way more detail than most folks care to hear, but it's just a way to illustrate, unfortunately, why sometimes it takes so long to get grant funds dispersed, and also your responsiveness to every request that we send to you is crucial. Okay, this is a really, really important one. Insubmittable, for those of you who are new to it, when you set up your account, very important that you go into your personal settings and you check this, yes, I want to receive email notifications box. We endeavor to have all of our grant-related communication go through Submittable. That's how we have a written record of everything that happens. And if you don't check this box, you're not going to get notifications, including your award status, requests for information, etc. So when you create your profile, please, please, please check that, yes, I want to receive notifications box. Along those lines, we do not have access to your Submittable account, so we can help you with issues specific to your grant application. But if you have, if you forget your password and get locked out, or if you have any of those issues, you're just going to have to submit a ticket with Submittable for help with that. So we can't reset your password or anything like that. Looking at the W-9 form, again, this is possibly the single most important piece of information, well, other than a quality application, that you can submit. It's one of the areas it's frequently a trouble spot, and it becomes a pretty significant delay in funding. And so we have instructions on the application. We have a link to this illustrative form. So box 1 is the name of the organization or the fiscal sponsor. So if you are using a fiscal sponsor, you need to submit the W-9 form for that fiscal sponsor. Only use box 2 if you have a different DBA name. Box 3, this is another spot where folks will frequently get it wrong. The only 2 boxes that you should check are government or tax-exempt organization. Those are the only 2 entities that will be eligible for funding. And so only check one of those two boxes. Box 4, no matter who you are, the only thing you're going to check is other and write grantee. So box 4, only check other and write grantee. For part 2, enter your EIN. If you're registered with the IRS, whether you're a public or private entity, you're going to have that EIN, and you're only going to check employer ID number. I'm being very specific on this because if any of these things are incorrect, you will be asked to resubmit, or even worse, we're not going to catch it. We're going to send it along to our finance folks. They're going to catch it and they're going to send it back to us, which can sometimes add 2 weeks to the process. Part 3, the mailing address. You're going to enter your mailing address and remittance address if you get mail at a different place. Looking ahead, that's going to have to match the address on the invoice. Part 4, and this is another sticking point. When you sign it, it absolutely positively must be what we call a wet signature, which means that you print it out, you pick up a pen, you do it the old-fashioned way, you sign it in blue ink, you throw it on a scanner or use a scanning app on your phone, you scan it and send it back. I don't know what magical software they have, but our finance folks will catch any and all digital signatures, no matter how realistic they look. So please, please, please save yourself a step, take the extra step, sign it by hand, and get it submitted where it needs to go. And then part 5, you're only going to submit this if you want electronic funds transfer, or what we call ACH. And so if you're fine with getting a check in the mail, you're going to stop right here after signing part 4. If you want ACH, if you want electronic funds transfer, then you're going to fill out section 5, and you are going to have to include a screenshot of a voided check. We can't move ahead without that. If you don't want ACH, don't sign that. We notice a lot of folks don't want ACH, but they just see sign and date and they sign and date there. That unfortunately scraps the whole thing and it starts it over again. So again, this example is included in the application. Please, please, please take a look at it before you submit it. Okay, as of round 1, we implemented a new budget template. There are a couple of updates that we're still working on, but the budget form will look like this. Your organization name, the date, drop-down categories for what the category of spending is, request amount, description, and then when you do your final report, you're going to include your actual expenses. And so make sure to save this form. One of the biggest areas of feedback that I gave to folks who were not funded is that they did not provide specific enough information in their budget. So for example, if you have a cycling oriented program and you write $40,000 bicycles, that's going to be a hard one to evaluate. How many bikes are we talking about? Are they, four $10,000 bikes, or, $400 bikes? So, use the space that you have available to provide as much information as possible. If you're asking for money for staff time, break out those staff positions and include the total number of hours and the hourly rate. That can be burdened if you bundle in benefits with it, or it can just be the straight hourly rate. But again, use the space that's available to you to provide as much specific detail as possible. That really helps us get a comprehensive understanding of what your programming is. So, detail on the budget. It's really, really helpful. If you are using multiple outside contractors, please don't just say $20,000 contractors. Say $5,000 for a rafting company, $5,000 for, a bus company, etc. So, to the degree that you can line that out, it really, really helps us. Also keep in mind that your budget as submitted is what will be included in your grant agreement. And there are pretty detailed instructions in the application as well. You'll click a link that will take you to an Excel spreadsheet in Google Sheets. You can do your editing in Google Sheets, or you can download it and work in Excel or the platform of your choice, but it does have to be uploaded as a PDF document. And it has to be this form in this format. So please don't look at it and then create your own budget form. We're really trying to get things standardized. How are we doing on time? Not bad on time. Okay, I talked about reporting. Again, you will be expected to do a progress report at the midpoint of your program and a final report. We have started scheduling progress reports to go out at roughly 6 months from the grant agreement date. If you are wrapped up before the 6-month mark, please, submit accordingly. Or if you need more time, you can do that. And then I believe final reports are going to be scheduled to go out at the 12-month mark. We understand that different programs have different timetables. And so if you have individual timetables, or you think you saw it or you haven't, you can reach out directly and we'll get you those reports. One of the things that I want to stress is reporting is important for 2 reasons. Number 1, it helps you report to us that you are on track with your grant funded project and or have completed it successfully, but also it's increasingly a really valuable tool for us for data and information gathering. We're gathering an ever increasing body of knowledge about the different types of programs that are funded, the impact of them, et cetera. And those of you who have been funded for a number of years are going to notice, especially this year, that we're asking for some more specific information about economic impact, how are you tracking outcomes and demographic data, et cetera. And so you guys are the front line in outdoor recreation programming for youth in the state of New Mexico. And so we're relying on you to be the subject matter experts to help us increase our body of knowledge, because the better we get at storytelling, the better we get at reporting the actual outcomes and the impact of our programming, the more support we can get for sustainable and increased funding. As I said earlier, also, please, if you get funded, make sure to tag us and recognize us in social media or any printed materials that you have. We love telling your stories as well. And so if you have great photos or videos to share, we really, really, really want to see those. Michelle puts those to fantastic use. We feature grantees in our newsletter, et cetera. So, help us help you get the word out about the amazing work that you guys do. Along the lines of talking about successful program implementation, ORD staff are available to support you in whatever manner we can. If you run into speed bumps, if you're struggling with program implementation, if things on the ground have changed. Maybe you thought you were going to be able to implement a program at a school that's no longer available, or maybe there have been staff changes. We really want to do anything we can to support you in successful implementation and completion of your program. That said, it's far easier for us to figure out how to support at the 3-month mark than 2 weeks before the 18-month mark. And so if challenges come up, if struggles come up, if there's anything that we can do to provide support, please reach out, and we try to be as responsive as we can and as supportive as we can to grantees to provide information and resources, et cetera. Some other funding opportunities. Again, I discussed Trails Plus. Trails Plus is our other main grant program. It provides the infrastructure side of outdoor recreation. There are 3 funding tiers depending on the number of partners and the regional or local impact. And those are $25,000 to $99,999, $100,000 to $499,999, and $500K to $1 million. Michelle, can you jump in? When is the Trails? What's the current Trails Plus application period, and when is there an upcoming webinar?
Sure, there's no upcoming webinar, but it is on our website, the most recent one. So you can pop over to that link that I just put in the chat to Trails Plus, and you can view the most recent webinar for info. And then that grant cycle will also end on the 31st of January, but it is currently open now for applications.
Beautiful, thank you. Also, you'll notice on the page, New Mexico Main Street is another EDD division that has a really good and very comprehensive community grants page on their website. So often when folks reach out and ask about additional grant opportunities, or perhaps they're not a good fit for OEF or Trails Plus, I will refer them to the New Mexico Main Street site, and there's a QR code there, or you could just Google New Mexico Main Street and it'll take you there. But we've debated coming up with our own community grants page, and honestly, the Main Street folks do such a good job that there's no point in us reinventing the wheel. So I would encourage you to check that out as well. Last slide in the slide deck is my contact info. Again, I'm the grants coordinator. Any and all questions about OEF, you can direct them to me. Starting tomorrow, I have a bookings page open where you can schedule individual one-on-one calls. What I stress with those is I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do or what will or won't get you funded, but I can, to the best of my degree, answer specific questions about the program or your application. So please avail yourself of that. I would say the earlier you can avail yourself of that, the the more time you'll have to develop a quality application. If you're wondering if your program is eligible or what kind of things would strengthen it, I'm happy to answer those questions. There's my email as well. You can always reach out to me directly if you're not able to schedule something. If you have a smartphone, you're not sure what to do about the QR code, just zap that, open the camera app in your smartphone, point it at it, and then that will take you to the website. What I'm going to do now, and hopefully do it in no more than 10 minutes, is do a quick run through of the OEF application. So folks know what they're expecting. Again, the application is not going to be live until January 1st, but just for especially for folks who are new to it, who can see what the application looks like, we'll go ahead and we will go ahead and share that. Let me do that. Michelle, can you see this okay? Is this coming through?
Yep.
Perfect.
That's good.
All right, so folks, welcome to Submittable. Submittable is the application that we use for all things grant application submission, communication, and reporting. So when it goes live and you go into it, this is what you're going to see. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is no matter who is the one submitting an application, you can invite collaborators. So if multiple people in your organization are working on the grant application and you want them all to have access to it, multiple people with a submittable account can have access to the same submission. And so definitely avail yourself of that if you want multiple folks to have access to it. Some of this is basics. I'll scroll through it quickly. Organization name, what type, your website. We love branching here. So if you have a Facebook page or an Instagram account, we want to hear about that so we can share your lovely posts. We are going to ask that you have in fact said, yes, I want to receive those email notifications because that's important, your basic information. So by default, whoever submits the application, whoever the submitter of the application will be the designated primary point of contact. If your application is using a contract grant writer or a third-party partner or anything like that, it's important to check that there will be a different primary contact so that we can capture that information and transfer ownership of it. Because once we finish a review, we notify folks of their award acceptance or not via Submittable, and so we need to make sure that stuff's going to the right place. So please, if somebody other than the submitter is going to be the primary point of contact, make sure to update that. Also, if that point of contact changes at any point, it is your responsibility to make sure that point of contact is changed and Submittable. If you have any issues, you can just reach out to me directly. We're going to ask that you identify who attended and what the date was of the webinar so that we know that you're following those directions. If you have a fiscal sponsor, we want to capture that. Here's where you enter the W-9. There's a link to that sample W-9 form. Again, we will only accept the W-9 form that is linked to here. I apologize if you have an existing one, but to streamline things, we're only going to accept that state W-9 form that you link to from the application. If you've applied in the past, we want to know if you've applied, if you were awarded, and if you're in good standing with your paperwork. Please note that if you are a past grantee and you are very overdue on your paperwork, it may jeopardize your ability to get future funding. We ask you to check any and all activities that your program will include. This is one of those information gathering things where, number one, it helps us get an idea of what type of programming you're doing. It also helps with our reporting to identify all of the different types of programming that are represented. Your program abstract, this is the quick and dirty who, what, where, when, why. What is the name of your program? What are you doing? How many youth? This also is verbatim cut and pasted into your grant agreement. And so it's really important that you take some time to come up with a good, solid, and hopefully catchy program abstract. Did I skip over? Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped over your organization overview. One of the areas that people get confused is the organization overview versus the program overview. this is your organization overview. So if you're a nonprofit, when were you founded? What's your mission? What are your major successes? Give us an idea of who you are as an organization. And then down here, you've got the program description. And this is the specifics. What are you asking for grant funding to do? What are the specifics of the programming? What are the outcomes? What are the impacts? One of the biggest pieces of feedback that I have given to folks, both who were not funded, but also who were funded, is that there was not enough specificity. So, assume that the reviewer doesn't have any idea who you are, what you do. They're coming into it completely blind. And so you're telling a story about who you are and what you're going to do with those grant funds. You're going to estimate the total number of youth participating. New this year, we're going to ask you to estimate the total number of hours that each youth served. An estimate is fine. We're not, it's, to the best of your ability, how many hours will each of those youth spend outside? What part of year will it take in? What's the anticipated duration? What is your most appropriate community type, tribal, rural, urban, or land grant? What's the primary county where the youth will be coming from? Also new this year is if you serve youth in multiple counties, we're going to ask you about that and ask you to check any additional counties because we want to be tracking where the kiddos are coming from. Where is your program going to be taking place? What specific national forest? Whose land are you going to be operating on? It will strengthen your application to demonstrate that you know whose land that you're on. Do you have permits and permissions? I saw a good number of folks say, we're on public lands, we don't need permission. And that is quite often untrue. Almost any time you're operating organized activities on federal lands, whether that's Forest Service or BLM, some sort of permit is required. If you're operating on state trust lands, there's often a recreational permit. And so it will strengthen your application and indicate that you have a well thought out program to have done your homework and identify whose land are you on and what permits are required. You don't have to have all of those permits in place at the time of application, but we want to see that you know whether or not permits are required. Do you have insurance or are you going to get it? Please describe any steps to ensure the safety and well-being of participants. That can include physical safety, emotional safety. If you are working with youth, I would definitely suggest that you implement background checks if you have not already implemented them. Best practices is that any adult who has unsupervised contact with youth should have had some sort of a background check done. You can actually request funding for background checks in your grant request. How will you evaluate your program's success? Please look up, if you're not familiar with qualitative and quantitative measures, please look those up. We understand that we have a very wide range of programs with different resources. We're not expecting everyone to do a comprehensive social and emotional learning impact report, but we do want to see that how are you going to know that you're going to be successful? Do you plan on offering your program over multiple years? If yes, what kind of organizational support do you have? Do you have diversified fundraising? Do you have a supportive board who's bringing additional funding to the table, et cetera? We want to see a relatively detailed timeline broken down into 6-month increments. Here's where we ask about your annual operating budget with the caveat that grant exceeds cannot exceed 50% of your operating budget. How much money are you requesting? Are you willing to accept partial funding? Some stuff about the match and the match amount that you're bringing. Here's where you're going to upload that budget table, again in PDF format only. Here's where you go to access that budget form. We include some tips and tricks for the budget. Again, please read all of the directions. It's amazing how often folks will have not read the directions and submit anyway, and that does nothing but harm the strength of your application. Important thing to note here, we give you an opportunity to provide any additional detail that didn't fit in that table. This is not required, but it is strongly encouraged. If there's anything else that you want the reviewers to know that was not captured in that budget table, include it here. You got 500 words, so make the best of that. Here's where if you have any contractors or service providers for $5,000 or more, you're going to upload those as PDF. You're going to talk about equity, and equity looks different in different communities, but basically, what are the barriers to participation in outdoor recreation that your population of youth face, and how does your program reduce those barriers? Maybe they're culturally based, maybe they're socioeconomically based, maybe they're geographically based, but tell that story of how you are reducing those barriers to participation. We ask if you charge a fee. Do you have plans around language and cultural inclusion? Do you have plans and policies around physical and cognitive inclusion? How are you going to recruit and select youth? Because by statute, minimum 40% of youth benefiting from OEF funds have to be low income. We ask how you're going to establish that, and that can be Title I schools, free or reduced lunch, city or county demographic information. But we do want to see that that you're serving those marginalized and low income youth. What barriers do you face? This engage in some self-assessment and tell us what barriers you might have. By statute, every plan must include some climate and or environmental education programming. And so we want you to talk about that. New as of this year, we're asking about workforce development. That's another information gathering piece on our end. So are you doing job skills training? Do you have paid or unpaid youth interns? If you do have interns, are you providing monetary compensation for them? But tell us what you're doing about workforce development. We really like to see photos or supporting stuff that tells the story of your program. So please upload those, and make sure you get letters of support. Minimum 3 is strongly encouraged. More are better. You want to make sure that any letters of support are specific to this grant application and that are dated in a reasonable time frame from the grant application. So it's awesome that you got a letter of support in 2019 for a completely different grant. That doesn't count for this. What you're doing is documenting community support in real time for your Outdoor Equity Fund application. So that ends the real quick and dirty run through of the application. Again, this will be available in live starting January 1st. When you're in Submittable, save early and save often. Submittable does auto save, but it doesn't always auto save. And so, when you're in there chugging along in your grant application, make sure to save so you don't lose stuff. We've all been there where we're 4 hours in and all of a sudden the internet hiccups and we just lost our best thoughts ever. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And Michelle is going to prompt us in running through questions.
Yeah, great job, Evan. Super helpful, very informative. I love that you ran through the application. I think I can see here that folks found it really helpful, and they're looking to see that application now. So we'll go over the questions. I'm going to start at the top and just work my way down. The first question was asking if negotiated indirect cost rate agreements are allowable, or does the 10% administrative allowance take place of this? Take the place of this?
At the current moment, yes, the 10% fixed admin rate is the law of the land.
Okay. If awarded from the execution of contract, when do you predict that would be for this round? We would like to know if it is usable for this school year.
No, I can guarantee you that it will not be usable for the 25-26 school year. So, and I'm sorry, I meant to go over that. So the application period closes January 31st. Our goal is to have review completed and award decisions made, and awardee is notified by mid-March. Best case scenario, if we are rock stars about the disbursement process, we have funds dispersed by mid-May, but don't count on that. We can't make any promises. If you are if you're applying for funding for school year for a school year, I wouldn't plan on being able to implement your programming until the start of the 26-27 school year.
All right, somebody else is asking about the $5,000 limit for providing a cost comparison. It says, is the 5K limit per contractor or is it cumulative for all contracts in the grant expenses?
For the written bid and cost estimate, it is per contractor. And so, let's say you've got a climbing guide and a paddling guide and a mountain bike guide, and they're all $1,000 each. We don't need to see a written cost estimate from each of those. But, if I'm contracting Big Al's Albuquerque Rafting Company for $6,000, then they would need to provide that cost estimate. Um,
Great.
and if I'm not answering any of these questions clearly, please feel free to respond in the comments as well.
Awesome. So the next question is about the time frame of when you're awarded, when you have to spend the funding down. I believe that's 18 months.
Yes. And again, it's not 18 months from when you were notified that you got funded. It's 18 months from the date that your grant agreement has been signed and fully executed by the Economic Development Department. And so that could be as much as 6 weeks from that can be as much as 6 weeks from the award announcement.
Great. And somebody else
But
is
you don't
asking
have to
about
spend that. But you don't have to take that long. You can take less.
Somebody else is asking about the W-9, if it can be completed virtually, then printed and signed, or the scanned version be edited.
Yeah, so the state form is a fillable PDF, and you can enter everything else digitally, print it out, and sign it. It's just that the signature and ideally the date should be wet signature or handwritten.
Somebody else was asking about the recording of this meeting. That will be sent to you guys automatically. I don't know if I can edit out the little fumbly at the front end of things, but it will be sent out shortly. Is having a social media presence required to be awarded? No, it is not a requirement. Bonus, it's always great to get the word out that way about what you're doing, but definitely not a requirement. Somebody asking about, can they sign up with Submittable now, and can the grant application be released sooner than the first of the year?
No,
No. You can
no.
probably, I think you can create your account on Submittable, but you can't have access to the application. And that's just, fairness so that everyone has the same amount of time to work on their applications. How do we find the Submittable link once the application is live? It is on our website. So I dropped the link in the chat. You can also just go to nmoutside.com and click on the Outdoor Equity Fund under grants, and it's in there. You'll see a big link off to the right. Should be pretty obvious where you can find it. Will we receive the rubric if our program is not selected so we can improve the application?
So you will not receive the rubric at this point. At this point, we're not providing specific scoring information. But what I did do for round one is I made myself available for feedback calls. And so, like if you were an eligible program that was reviewed and not awarded, I'm more than happy to take 15 to 30 minutes to relay feedback and comments on your application to hopefully strengthen it for the next time. I want to say after round one, I did 35 calls, just giving feedback. And one of the things I'm stressing is even if you are a round one grantee, or even if you have been funded in the past, I'm within capacity. I'm more than happy to take a look at your past application to see if there's anything that jumps out at me that's been an ongoing issue. I have the benefit of, I laid eyeballs on every one of those 140 applications, and I personally reviewed 85 of them. And so, I have a pretty good longitudinal idea of where the sticking points are. And again, out of ethics and fairness, I can't tell you what you should or shouldn't do, but I can give you general feedback on your application.
Great. Do you have a version of the application available as Word, Google for drafting purposes? We do not, unfortunately. Again, that's just for fairness' sake, so everyone has the same amount of time.
Yeah,
Um,
and even unfortunately in Submittable, there's no way to download a PDF version of the application. What I do personally when I apply for grants, or what I suggest that folks do, is open up a Word or a Google Doc or whatever and just copy and paste all the questions into that so that you're working from your source document and then you're copy and pasting back into the application.
that's also a great tip for not losing any information. That way, it's saved in your Word document in case the internet crashes or something. Who or what entities should write letters of support for a school?
Some examples of that might be teachers within the school. That might be parents of students who would benefit from it. It might be community partners. Maybe there's a boys and girls club or an after-school club. Anyone who would have a stake in or a benefit from that proposed programming. Um, what I would say is don't write your own letter of support. So, if I'm an eighth grade teacher and I'm applying for an outdoor equity fund, it's generally not suggested for me to write my own letter of support about how awesome my program is. So, I often liken it to a job application where, you have to provide references on a job application. If you can't find 3 to 5 people who can say nice things about you, that's concerning. But so, think about who the stakeholders in your community are and who might be willing to write a glowing endorsement of you and your proposed program.
All right, next question is, if we get awarded and then utilize and report on outcomes within 12 months, can we apply for the FY27 OEF cycle, or are we limited to one award per 18 months?
It is one award per 12 months. And so for example, if you apply for this round 2 of FY26 and you're awarded, you cannot apply for round 1 of FY27. You would have to wait to apply for round 2 of FY27.
Correct.
Equally, the 61 orgs who were awarded in round 1 of FY26, they're not eligible to reapply for this round. And so it's, one award for per 12-month cycle, and you have to have spent minimum 50% of your funds and have that reflected on your progress report.
Perfect. All right. If a higher ed institution is our fiscal agent, does the info in the W-9 have to be info about the higher ed institution or the higher ed's foundation info? Ooh, very specific. Good question.
Yeah, I gotta read that one.
Yep, it's by Edward Martinez.
Yeah, if it does the Yes, yes. So if you have a fiscal sponsor, the fiscal sponsor is in fact legally the grantee, and you are a program of that grantee. And so that higher ed institution, it would be their W-9. It's kind of confusing because like you're still the applicant, but the fiscal agent, their W-9 is what is entered. The funds are dispersed to them, and then they manage them and pass them through. And they are ultimately the one that signs off on the grant agreement because the funds are being dispersed to them. Um, Something else that I don't know that I mentioned, but that was an issue for a couple of folks this year is an organization cannot be both a fiscal sponsor and a grantee themselves. And so we had a couple of folks who, they were serving as the fiscal sponsor for a different organization, but then they had their own grant funded programming as well. And so effective now, you cannot be both a fiscal sponsor and a program or grantee, if that makes sense.
Yep. All right. Somebody was asking the link to sign up for Submittable. I dropped that in the chat. So if you want to create an account in Submittable, it's just at submittable.com. Do applicants use a set wage per hour or use the volunteer rate the IRS allows for the volunteers who work with us?
I would suggest looking up whatever the current federal rate is and tagging it to that. I I think current it's like 34 something an hour currently. It's a pretty generous hourly rate. But yeah, so just whatever the current federal rate is, that's what you're going to use.
Somebody else is asking if the newly added economic impacts mentioned in the presentation are part of the application or reporting requirements. I'm not sure the
So
specific.
it if awarded, you will, or I mean, current grantees, I actually have it ready to go. I have a reporting guide. But uh, where's that question? Oh,
Just
so we're not asking you to do any economic impact studies. That's for the economists of the world. You know, what ours is related to is, did you create jobs as a result of your OEF programming? Did you spend money at New Mexico businesses? And if so, give us a breakdown of how it was spent. So it's pretty basic stuff. Um, and for the last two comments, I acknowledge that it can be an additional step to copy and paste, but we don't have the functionality, and that's not going to change anytime soon.
so that was in regard to the copy paste question. Yeah, it sounds like maybe you can't actually copy and paste from the fields, so that is unfortunate, but I think the best you could do is just write down the number of the question and your answer, so that way you can at least save your answers. It says you are creating extra burden headache for applicants by not providing a separate application document. It does not give anyone an unfair advantage if you make an application document available to every applicant within the January 1 to 31 timeframe. Yeah, I don't know about that. We've always done the process that way. So if that's, a common shared concern, it's something we could bring up to our director and talk about as a team.
Yeah, what I can say is we have had extensive pros and cons discussions around it, and both looking at what practice, how practices are done elsewhere, in addition to a number of other factors. The way it's handled now is the way it will be handled for the foreseeable future. Last question. I work for a nonprofit that has little funds outside of pass-through money. What would be included and considered when applying for a grant? So uh, I don't know how to answer that with the information I have. What I would say is, if you have specific questions, reach out to me directly by email or schedule a one-on-one call.
Are we allowed to add multiple pages to the grant budget form?
Unfortunately, no. We're looking. I totally acknowledge that it's a very basic grant budget form. Our limitation is that is copied and pasted as is into our grant agreement. We are continually working to update and improve our practices, but currently you're locked in on that one budget page. So, use the space to the best of your ability and add additional detail in that budget narrative. But yeah, that's what we have for the time being.
Yeah, that budget narrative space is a great spot to add any sort of additional information. All right, I think that's all the questions. Really, really solid, thoughtful questions, you guys. Thanks for some of the feedback too. We always like to consider trying to make this as easy of a process as possible for folks. So thank you for the feedback. With that, I think we will go ahead and end the meeting, and the reporting will be sent out shortly. Thanks so much, Evan.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, everybody.